The Zodiac Killer was a murderer who didn't seem motivated solely by the act itself, but rather by the attention it garnered from the media. To him, it was akin to a game of catch me if you can, relishing in the fear and attention he caused. He meticulously sent detailed letters to both law enforcement and media outlets, divulging information about his crimes that only the perpetrator would know. Additionally, he mocked the police by including encrypted codes in his letters, suggesting they could reveal his identity if solved. The Zodiac spree began with the shooting of two teenagers in a lover's lane in Benicia in December 1968. Over the following year, he claimed more victims, all the while taunting authorities with his messages. His choice of victims, young couples in remote locations, and his careful planning aimed to maximize attention and provoke law enforcement. Despite extensive investigations and numerous potential suspects, the Zodiac Killer remained unidentified, with only DNA evidence pointing to various individuals. Although he claimed to have killed as many as 37 people, authorities could only definitively link him to 5 confirmed murders. John Wayne Gacy, akaThe Killer Clown, led a double life that horrified the nation. By day, he donned the persona of Pogo the Clown, bringing smiles to the faces of children at local community events and charitable gatherings. But behind this facade lurked the depraved serial killer. In Norwood Park Township, Illinois, between 1972 and 1978, Gacy preyed upon at least 33 young men and boys, luring them to his abode under the guise of offering employment opportunities, which he advertised in public areas. Once inside, his victims fell into the clutches of a remorseless predator. The true horror of Gacy's crimes came to light in 1978, when law enforcement uncovered a ghastly scene. A significant number of human remains buried in the crawlspace of his residence and scattered throughout the surrounding area. As investigators peeled back the layers of Gacy's life, they unearthed a chilling narrative of meticulous planning and grotesque souvenirs. Gacy had meticulously documented his atrocities in journals and kept grisly mementos from his victims, treating his murderous rampage as a perverse game that brought him unspeakable pleasure. In 1980, Gacy faced justice when he was found guilty of 33 counts of murder and sentenced to death. His final words, "Kiss my ass." Ted Bundy, characterized by his silver tongue, used his devil's charm to manipulate and gain the trust of his victims. With his smooth-talking, Bundy easily deceived those around him, presenting himself as a trustworthy individual. This facade allowed him to perpetrate a chilling spree of over 30 murders spanning nearly 4 years, from 1974 to 1978, across multiple states. Targeting primarily young women and girls, Bundy employed various tactics to lure his victims, often posing as an authority figure or feigning vulnerability to elicit sympathy and assistance. By appearing non-threatening and using props like crutches or a sling, he gained their trust and proximity, only to violently end their lives. Bundy's depraved acts didn't end with murder. He would revisit crime scenes to engage in acts of necrophilia, and even went as far as decapitating at least 12 victims, keeping their severed heads as grisly trophies. Despite his heinous crimes, Bundy managed to evade capture for years, blending seamlessly into society with a seemingly normal life. During his trial in Florida, Bundy attempted to manipulate the narrative by representing himself and claiming to be a victim. However, the overwhelming evidence against him painted a damning picture, leading to his conviction and subsequent death sentence. Jeffrey Dahmer, also known as the Milwaukee Cannibal, nearly got away with it all had it not been for one victim who managed to get away. Jeffrey Dahmer would usually lure men, primarily young African-American men and boys, back to his apartment, where he would put drugs in their drinks, and afterward, he would do what he pleased with them. After the act of terror upon his victims, he would dismember their bodies and keep various body parts such as skulls and hands with him, even eating some of the body parts. He tried different experiments on some victims, hoping it would give them an undead state by using a drill and harmful chemicals, thinking this would make them immortal. In total, Dahmer was convicted of killing 15 men and boys, although he confessed to additional murders. Perhaps the worst part is that the number might have been lower, as one of his victims, who was an underage boy from Laos, managed to escape his house even though Dahmer had drilled a hole in his head. Still, the police returned to Dahmer's house as Jeffrey would lie that he was his drunk boyfriend. Dahmer was eventually caught in 1991 and sentenced to life in prison, but would later die after an inmate beat him to death. Jack the Ripper, infamous for his series of murders in London's impoverished Whitechapel district in 1888, stands as one of history's most enigmatic figures. Despite claiming only 5 victims, his killings were marked by a level of precision akin to that of a skilled surgeon, leaving throats meticulously slit. What set Jack the Ripper apart from other serial killers of his time was his ability to evade capture. In an era devoid of social media and 24-hour news cycles, the public relied on newspapers and word of mouth for information, heightening the fear and uncertainty surrounding the murders. The Ripper's victims were prostitutes, likely solicited under the guise of paid services, unbeknownst to them that they had been marked for death. The press sensationalized the killings, detailing how the Ripper would meticulously remove internal organs, suggesting a level of anatomical knowledge beyond the grasp of the average citizen. The atmosphere of fear and speculation was palpable as the body count rose, with rumors swirling that the Ripper might be a vampire or a vengeful spirit targeting the sinners. Despite the intensive investigation and numerous suspects proposed over the years, the identity of Jack the Ripper continues to captivate and elude historians and amateur sleuths alike, shrouded in the fog of time and speculation. Charles Manson, a notorious cult leader, rose to infamy in the late 1960s with the formation of his cult, the Manson family. Manson's magnetic personality and twisted ideologies attracted a lot of fools, ready for radical actions. Central to Manson's philosophy was his belief in an impending race war, which he termed helter-skelter. He envisioned inciting chaos by orchestrating murders targeting celebrities, which would be blamed on black gangs, ultimately sparking the race war he prophesied. In August 1969, Manson's dark vision materialized when members of his cult carried out a series of brutal murders under his orders. Pregnant actress Sharon Tate, along with 4 others, was viciously slain at her Los Angeles home. The following night, the Manson family struck again, brutally killing couple Leno and Rosemary LaBianca in their residence. Messages scrawled in blood at both crime scenes, including the word pigs, aimed to incite further fear and confusion, implicating law enforcement as the targets of the attacks. Notably, Manson himself did not physically partake in the murders, but instead manipulated his followers into carrying out his twisted desires. Despite his indirect involvement, Manson was convicted of conspiracy to commit murder and initially sentenced to death. However, his sentence was later commuted to life imprisonment. Ed Gein, a psycho known as the Butcher of Plainfield, lived a secluded life with his domineering mother on their family farm in Wisconsin. Following his mother's death in 1945, Gein's already fragile mental state spiraled into darkness, leading him down a path of depravity characterized by necrophilia, grave robbery, and ultimately, murder. In 1957, local authorities investigating a woman's disappearance were led to Gein's property, where they uncovered horrors beyond imagination. Gein, once regarded as the quiet farmer, had transformed his home into a chamber of horrors, fashioning household items and clothing from human skin and body parts. Skulls were repurposed as bowls and furniture was upholstered with human skin, revealing a macabre obsession with his deceased mother. Further investigation exposed Gein's gruesome activities, including the exhumation of corpses from local graveyards, where he collected body parts and preserved them in his morbid shrine to his mother. Gein's obsession with his deceased mother culminated in the murder of 2 women, whose mutilated and dismembered bodies were discovered on his property. Despite being diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia and deemed legally insane, Gein's crimes were so shockingly grotesque that they inspired horror films such as Psycho and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, perpetuating his legacy of terror and revulsion. Richard Ramirez, a so-called Night Stalker, terrorized California through a series of brutal home invasions and murders that spanned from June 1984 to August 1985. His methods were particularly heinous, characterized by late-night break-ins, savage beatings, sexual assaults, and even satanic rituals performed before the murders. The presence of satanic symbols at crime scenes earned him the moniker of the Night Stalker. Some victims endured prolonged acts of torture, both physical and psychological, suggesting that Ramirez derived pleasure from their suffering. The hunt for the Night Stalker became one of the largest manhunts in California history, involving over 200 detectives. In August 1985, Ramirez's reign of terror came to an end when he was recognized and apprehended by residents in East Los Angeles, who delivered a vigilante beating before his arrest. During his trial, Ramirez embraced his Night Stalker persona, often flaunting satanic symbols and taunting the families of his victims. Amidst the trial's intensity, a shocking event occurred. One of the jurors, Phyllis Singletary, died unexpectedly. Her death, attributed to a lethal combination of alcohol and prescription drugs, fueled speculation that Ramirez was somehow involved, especially given the timing during the trial's penalty phase. Ultimately, Ramirez was convicted on 13 counts of murder, 5 attempted murders, and 11 burglaries, facing justice for his horrific crimes. Andrey Chikatilo, an incredibly smart son of a gun, also goes by the name of Rostov Ripper. He perpetrated a reign of terror across Russian towns, including Rostov, Shakhty, and Novocherkassk, between 1973 and 1990. Exploiting the vulnerabilities of his victims, thanks to the time they lived in, Chikatilo preyed upon women and children, ultimately claiming the lives of at least 53 individuals. The Rostov Ripper's victims, ranging from 7 to 36 years old, fell prey to his depraved acts of necrophilia and cannibalism following their brutal murders. Chikatilo's modus operandi involved luring victims into public places such as bus or train stations, markets, or parks under the guise of offering assistance or financial aid. Presenting himself as a friendly and helpful figure, he gained their trust before leading them to secluded locations where he could carry out his heinous acts without interruption. The socio-economic turmoil of the Soviet Union during the 1980s provided fertile ground for Chikatilo predation, as many of his victims were desperate and vulnerable. His acts of violence, including mutilation and even the biting off of tongues and other body parts, demonstrated his sadistic tendencies. Despite an investigation by Soviet authorities, Chikatilo eluded capture for over a decade. He even took part in his investigation, helping the authorities to find such a vicious killer who was actually in plain sight. His killing spree finally came to an end in 1990 when routine document checks revealed his connection to the murders. During his trial, Chikatilo chillingly confessed to the murders, detailing the pleasure he derived from his acts. In 1994, Andrey Chikatilo was sentenced to death by firing squad.